Welcome back to the channel. As you can see, it's no longer called M2 fishing. It's now called Moss fishing, and I will do some videos later on to explain what's going on there. But today we are starting a new series called The Greatest Day in Bass Fishing History. And this is going to be episode 1, the 1971 Bassmaster Classic. The first Bassmaster Classic, the one that started it all. So here we go. In 1967, Ray Scott, aka the godfather of bass fishing, especially tournament bass fishing, started BASS, or the Bass Anglers Sportsman Society. He had an idea in his head to make bass fishing as big as all the other sports. He started out with an idea that he wanted it as big as golf, but realistically he wanted it as big as baseball, football, everything. That was his goal, that was his dream. So when he started Bass in 1967, he started putting on tournaments. And he started off with a big tournament, over 100 people, at Beaver Lake in Arkansas for a $100 entry fee, which was unheard of in those days. And he had a great turnout, but the media wasn't showing up for these tournaments. So for 4 years, from 1967 to 71, they kept having these tournaments, started getting over 200 boats in a lot of these tournaments, and the media still wasn't showing up. So Ray had an idea. First, let's talk a little bit about Ray. Ray loved bass fishing, loved fishing from the time that he was like 6 years old. He started a club when he was, 6, 7, 8 years old, called the Bluegill Anglers Club or something like that. And always loved fishing, and then grew up to be an insurance salesman as he graduated high school. And this fitted him perfectly because he was a fantastic speaker, known as a smooth talker. They said he could sell anything to anybody. So started out with the insurance salesman and then moved into his passion of bass fishing, starting one of the, today is the biggest club, the biggest bass club in the nation. And so he started getting sponsors, and he had a problem getting the media involved because there was an idea that a lot of these tournaments were cheated. The bass fishermen were cheaters. So he wanted to have a tournament that would showcase the anglers, and he called it the Super Bowl of bass fishing. And so he started the Bassmaster Classic. He announced it earlier in the year of 1971 to the anglers, and they had to qualify via points. And so going into the very last tournament of the year, it was at Ross Barnett Reservoir in Mississippi. And it was like the point standings were so close that anybody that was in the tournament, there's over 200 anglers in this tournament, anybody could have qualified. So they go into the tournament, like I said, over 200 anglers, and the top 25 are going to qualify for this Bassmaster Classic. And turns out Roland Martin, we all know Roland Martin, we all know and love him, grew up watching him, wins the tournament and obviously qualifies for the Bassmaster Classic along with 25 other people. Now, you'll read about that only 24 men fished the 1971 Bassmaster Classic, and that is because Johnny Adams, I believe that's his name, Johnny Adams of Florida, he qualified for the Classic, but he wanted to save his vacation for his family time, and so he didn't go. He couldn't get off of work for it, even though not knowing that this would end up being the beginning of the biggest franchise in bass fishing. So anyway, they got the format for this tournament. They decided it was going to be a mystery lake, and they wanted a lake that no one had ever fished before. At least none of the anglers that had qualified for it, or that most of them would qualify for, had never fished before. So they got to thinking, and they decided on some rules first. So they decided all the anglers would have an equal playing field. The first thing was they would all fish from the same type of boat. So they got 24 Rebel fastback bass boats, and these are like a little bathtub with a 90-horse motor on the back. And this thing goes like 37 miles per hour for in those days was so fast. It actually had a motor guide foot controlled trolling motor. It had a Lowrance depth sounder, just a flasher, which obviously if you guys have ever used a flasher, you just see little blips on a screen, but was the big technology back then. It had a fishing temp, which essentially just told them the temp of the water, and it had an anchor. And then they were allowed to bring 10 pounds of tackle, which was strictly enforced. They had to weigh in their tackle boxes every single day. And if they weren't 10 pounds or less, then Ray Scott and I think Bob Cobb were allowed to take whatever tackle they wanted out to get it down to 10 pounds. So they had to be very careful, these anglers. And Bobby Murray would say that he made sure, like he went down to the post office to make sure his tackle box was okay. So they also were allowed 4 rods. And I don't know if you guys have ever seen the rods from back then, but they had spinning rods, which is a huge spinning reel. I hate to see what kind of line they used, but they also had casting rods with a bait caster, and it had like a pistol grip, so they couldn't cast near as far as what we could cast today, but these guys were catching fish. So all the anglers meet in Atlanta, not knowing where this tournament's going to be. 24 of them plus 24 media, sports writers, and photographers. Like I said, Ray Scott wanted to bring this to the masses, so he got the media involved in this so it could be shown to the world because he wanted this to be a huge sport. Obviously succeeded at that. But so he got the media writers and the anglers together, and they got on a private plane, and they took off from Atlanta, Georgia. It was cold. It was rainy. They take off from Atlanta, and they get up to 12,000 feet, and Ray Scott stands up in the airplane, and he says, "We want to go fish the hardest lake in the world." And the quote he said was, "You wouldn't expect the World Series to be played on a Little League diamond. And if you won it, certainly you wouldn't expect this quality of fisherman, the world's greatest 24, to go fish a hatchery for a tournament." So they knew it was going to be somewhere difficult. And then he opens up the envelope and he announces Lake Mead in Las Vegas, Nevada, and everybody cheers. I think mostly because they were excited to go to Vegas, but at the same time, like, they've never fished this lake. And if anybody knows anything about Lake Mead, it is like bathtub water clear. It's crystal clear water. It's like the average depth is like 450 feet. It's a huge lake. Hoover Dam is the dam, so you know it's deep. And it's crystal clear. So this is going to be the most difficult. These men are from the South. They fish, grass lakes, muddy grass lakes, and there's some clear lakes, but not like this. So this is like nothing they've ever fished. They have limited tackle, limited rods and reels, and a boat they've never fished out of. So, which may have been nicer than most of the boats they've ever used to fishing out of. So the Classic was going to be a 3-day tournament. Each angler would be allowed 10 fish per day, which obviously is a lot of fish back then. For us, it's obviously 5 fish for most of our tournaments. And then these fish, they didn't have live wells on these boats, so the fish were kept in stringers, like you'd keep a dozen crappie or something. And they're kept on stringers, and then they're weighed in, and they have like grocery store scales to weigh these fish in. So these guys are just lobbing these stringers of fish up on the scale at the end of the day. But this was like the beginning of catch and release, and Ray Scott is the father of catch and release. So they released as many of the fish that didn't die, which I'm sure a lot did die because of stringers very hard on the fish, but they did release a lot of the fish, which was, great, and the reason why bass fishing is what it is today because of that. So they all blast off. They do like a shotgun start, and they all blast off. They were able to practice. The very first day they got there, they were allowed to practice like 7 or 8 hours, which on a big lake like that is hardly anything. So they blast off the very first day, and they're throwing some of the names in this tournament. Like Roland Martin, Bobby Murray, Tom Mann, Mann's Bait Company, Mann's Jelly Worm. So right away, they're out there. They're throwing spinner baits like the Zorro. Most guys want to throw a spinner bait because they thought it's clear water. There's no way they're going to bite this thing. A lot of guys are throwing plastic worms, jigs, and they're trying deep water and shallow water. So after day one, they weigh in, and Bobby Meader of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, he's got, I don't think he had a limit, but he had like 15 pounds, 12 ounces, and that put him at a lead for the day, and he's over Tom Mann. Tom Mann's in second place. He's 2.5 pounds back of Bobby Meader. And it's funny because they're doing this weigh-in. These guys are just like wearing mechanics jumpsuits or coveralls, like whatever they would wear to their job, and they're fishing and stuff, which I thought was pretty funny. But anyway, so they, this was before the days of obviously before Bassmaster Live or Bass Track or anything like that. So nobody had any idea what these guys are catching until the weigh-in, which is, it seems actually really fun because it would be like very suspenseful. You would have any idea. You don't know if you caught them good or you didn't catch them at all. You might have 15 pounds and that's dead last, or you might have 15 pounds and you're winning. So day two, they go out and they kind of had started to figure things out. And Tom Mann comes in with his second full stringer, and he actually takes the lead by 13 ounces. And Bobby Murray that day had came in, and he had a bunch of bigger fish. He didn't have a full 10 fish limit, but he had big fish. And he actually was right behind Tom Mann by 13 ounces, which obviously is very close, especially when you're talking about 10 fish limits. So he's in second place, and then after that, it was pretty spaced out. So, in this tournament, all the media personalities, the photographers and the writers, they were actually allowed to fish with the pros during this tournament, and they would get, Ray Scott paid him out each day. The biggest bass caught by the media personality was paid $50 a pound for the biggest bass. So that was pretty cool. They got to be involved in that. So, so the final day rolls around, and obviously Tom Mann's in the lead. He feels pretty good. He goes out, catches a limit, 10 bass, but all of his are like 12 inches, and he's using his signature jelly worm. And he's got a bunch of small fish. And here comes Roland Martin. He weighs in a 6-pound, 9-ounce bass, which is gigantic in this tournament. That paid him, $600 or $700 for this fish. And but he actually didn't have many other fish. He ended up in fourth place for the tournament. So comes down to Bobby Murray and Tom Mann, and Bobby Murray goes up there and weighs. He's got like a 5.5 pounder, a 4, and a couple of 3s. Ends up weighing in 43 pounds and 11 ounces for all 3 days, and he beats Tom Mann by almost 6 pounds. And those quality fish are what won it for him. And what he was doing, he said he was going into these backs of these canyons and looking for shade, or you'd find where like the wastewater came in from Las Vegas, which sounds really nasty, but that made it a little bit murkier water, and that's where these fish were, anywhere they could find shelter. And so he was throwing that spinnerbait around, caught almost all his big fish on the spinnerbait. And he was throwing it anywhere he could find any kind of shade or a single stick. He said he went back into one cove. There was 2 little willow trees, and he caught like a 4-pounder off there. He said he was going into one cove, and Roland Martin was coming out. And Roland Martin's like, "Oh, I just caught a 6-pounder out of there." And he's like, "Oh, great." But he still goes in there and fishes. He actually ends up catching a 3-pounder out of there. And then at the end of the day, he caught the 5.5 pounder. He said he like bear hugged the fish knowing that it was the winning fish. And he went in like 30 minutes early to weigh in because he knew like he had it won. And so this tournament, the first tournament ever to offer a prize, it was a $10,000 prize. And they decided, if they spaced it out, it wouldn't be that significant. So they gave the whole prize to the first place winner. So Bobby Murray takes home 10 grand, which, in 1971 is like 200 grand today. And his wife had been playing penny slots, and I guess she was sitting there with a bunch of pennies, and Ray Scott asks her, "What's all those pennies about?" And she goes, "Well, I've been playing the penny slots, but if my Bobby wins today, we're going to start playing the nickels." So I thought that was pretty funny, but Bobby Murray wins that one. It's going to go down as one of the greatest days in bass fishing history because it's the first Bassmaster Classic. We've had 40 since, so one of the greatest tournaments in the world. And it set the stage for bass fishing is what it is today, especially tournament fishing. Bobby Murray would go on to win another one. He's one of a few anglers to have won 2 Bassmaster Classics. Roland Martin never got her done. Won a ton of tournaments, tons of Angler of the Years, but never won a Classic. And now his son Scott's made the elites, and that's his goal, is to win a Bassmaster Classic for his unfinished family business. So check out Scott's YouTube page. It's actually really good. It's one of my favorite YouTube channels to watch. And so yeah, that's the story of the first Bassmaster Classic on the channel. It's finally like warm enough to fish, so we should have more fishing videos coming up. And this series, the greatest day in bass fishing history, will keep going. I'm going to try to do it at least once a week. And then we're going to have another series that should start hopefully next week. I'll announce that. It's going to be a really interesting series, so stay tuned for that. Make sure, if you guys like this content, it seemed interesting to me, so I thought maybe you guys would like it. Go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and I'll keep putting this content out. And give us a like. I mean, it helps more than you know. And yeah, check out Titan Tungsten if you're looking for tungsten weights. Vector hooks, literally the sharpest hooks and they will not rust, like period. So check them out. They have Facebook pages and web pages. Bass Fishing Network Live, check them out on Facebook. Just a great site. Trying to think what else. Line taming serum. They've got scents. They've got spray for your line and reels. Great scents though. I love their scents. You look them up on Instagram or Facebook, and he'll hook you up with some great stuff. And yeah, so also Pulse Fish Lures. Just got hooked up with them. Actually, I haven't tried them much, so that'll be coming up in the videos. So yeah, thanks for checking out the channel, and we'll keep some content coming for y'all. Y'all have a good night, and thanks for watching.